Is saying your political opponents shouldn't be alive on social media 25th Amendment worthy? Of course it is. Just ask yourself what would be happening among the conservative media if President Obama was president, or Obama was president and was tweeting stuff like that. Hang him. Hang him. Can you imagine? How can you also say that there are no issues of not you, sir, but like the broader you? How can you say that that's not 25th Amendment worthy? How can you say that that's not a cognitive impairment, at least question? The guy mistook a test he had at Walter Reed that was a dementia test or a dementia screen essentially, and thought it was an IQ test. If you watch his debates from like 2015, 2016, he was much sharper then. Now, I'm not telling you he's like meandering Biden style, but the idea like these questions are irrelevant. Why are they irrelevant? And then the level of partisan rancor. You know, people were making fun of Charlie Kirk dying. Not me. I don't think that you like. I feel like it's bad karma to do something like that. I don't take pleasure in it, but you know, them saying, "Oh, look how ghoulish they are," and the supporters of Trump won't have no ability to recognize he's doing this and see that as any kind of, oh, that's just him trolling. They did this sort of fascism is like this weird thing where people say outrageous, comically absurd things, and it's always treated as unserious. But what that is, it's just always kind of like approximate in the conversation, and because it's always approximate in the conversation, all of a sudden it just becomes normalized at a later point at which they want to normalize it. The video that guy was reacting to was put out by Ely Slotkin and some other folks who had served in the American military, saying you don't have an obligation to obey illegal orders. They don't. The oath is not to the commander-in-chief. The oath is to the Constitution. And then Stephen Miller saying that this is sedition, this is rebellion. No, it's not. They're calling an objective assessment of what the law actually is and what the rightful opportunities are in conjunction with the law. They're calling that rebellion and sedition. Hang them. Dude, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Like, do you think this guy and this movement, they're just going to leave office if they lose elections? Assuming the elections are even free and fair? Do you think that? What on earth? The guy tried to steal a presidential election the first time, had a fake elector scheme. And now there's these not merely delusions of grandeur, just delusions. And it's becoming increasingly not merely more dangerous in sort of a broader sense, but the violence of the rhetoric is going up. Can you imagine? And it'll barely make the news. It all gets dismissed because there's this constant effort at making you unable to focus on any one thing by constantly introducing absurdity into it, purposely introducing absurdity into it, purposely introducing at times levity into it. But this is constant, dude. He puts out this video where he's taking dumps on all the protesters. This constant dehumanization of the opponents, this constant dehumanization of opponents' leadership, trying to go after ActBlue, the funding mechanisms of the rival, essentially main dominant party, trying to go after some kind of fake Antifa threat by making things that could get you hemmed up in some of these new laws, anti-capitalist views, anti-Christian views, whatever the hell that fucking means to them. I'm not making, you guys have seen this? Look. Look. I'll show it to you. Here, don't take my word for it. Trump's NSPM 7 labels common beliefs as terrorism indicators: anti-Christian, anti-American, and anti-capitalism. That's what they're calling this. Oops, excuse me. Let me close this. Look, here, hold on. Here's what they're looking at. The Trump administration isn't only targeting organizations or groups, but even individuals and entities whom NSPM 7 says can be identified by any of the following indicators of violence: anti-Americanism, whatever the fuck that means; anti-capitalism; anti-Christianity, of course; support for the overthrow of the United States government, fine; Extremism on migration, what does that mean? Extremism on race, what does that mean? Extremism on gender, what does that mean? Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, what the fuck are you talking about? Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on morality. What the fuck does that even mean? Right? So this idea here that, like, I mean, look at the picture. All of it is being designed to marshal the forces of the federal government to diminish, attack, imprison, limit the scope and effectiveness and, frankly, the health of the rival political party. That's what it's all designed to do. And if you bring this up, they'll tell you have Trump derangement syndrome. But, like, look at what the fuck they're doing. I don't know how we solve this problem, because the other folks in the leadership, both in the cabinet and then the Republicans in Congress, for example, they have no appetite for confronting this terrible fact. Dude, when you have dangerous and when you have incompetent or otherwise compromised people in positions of leadership, a la Condoleezza Rice, bad shit happens. Tragedy happens. I'm just waiting to see what that looks like. Luke, do you think immigrants from certain regions inherently add more value to the U.S., and should immigration prioritize origin and perceived worth? It already does. There's no question. If you look at the statistics, the amount of value that an immigrant with a college education and fluency or proficiency in the native language, in this particular case, English, not the official language, we don't have one, but English, this vastly produces higher gains. Vastly. It increases investment more over the long term. It increases innovations at firms that have them. You don't have to pay for their education. They already come here educated, versus somebody who comes here and they might get an education here and then they can maximize their value more. But if they already come here educated, let's say they got educated in China, let's say they got educated in, I don't know, Finland or something, you don't have to pay for it. There's simply no question. There's absolutely no question they produce more. Now, these are turning people into what they produce on a spreadsheet. I think the question about, like, what your immigration policy should probably be a little bit more expansive than merely these kinds of cold mathematical calculations. But it's not really in debate. That's immigration scholars, to the best of my knowledge, don't even argue about that. Certainly that's the case. That doesn't mean that there aren't contributions throughout the immigration experience or the immigrant profile, even if they don't necessarily have, if they're not high skilled or highly educated. There are other ways in which they can benefit. But absolutely, that's the case, and that should be prioritized. In fact, this is what Zeke Hernandez has been arguing. As I mentioned before, we've not redone the allotment and lottery system around how many green cards we give out, how many visas we give out, what visas we give them out to, H-1B or otherwise. We haven't updated that system since 1990. And the point he tries to make is we have to rethink this for a modern economy. The economy is 3 times the size now as it was in 1990. The needs are more. And of course, we know this. It's not the only driver. Family reunification, for example, can be a driver. But one of the main drivers, if not the number one driver, is labor demand. And we know that if you grant a legal pathway for it, that is a substitute, not a complement to illegal immigration. So, for example, you can offer a temporary pass, a 5-year visa, to go to a low-skilled immigration employee or a visa holder to do landscaping in Iowa, or some kind of firm's work that related to clean energy. Now that we're speaking of Iowa, that's one of their main industries there. You can do that, and then the visa is shortened and they have to go back. And then you can create an allotment for ones who have a variety of set of skills, who come more educated. They might have family here. You name it. You can absolutely prioritize along that, but it at least should match the modern economy. And we should be making conscious choices about this rather than having this restricted system. Now people are overstaying their visas who come here. Now people are just, and you have to have an orderly border. Now they're just, pouring over that. Like, there's all kinds of ways in which, at a bare minimum, the whole thing needs to be more orderly. The whole thing needs to be modernized. And you can make some of these calculations about what's valuable and what's not in conjunction with reforming the system. But we don't even do that. As a general immigration proponent, do you see the catastrophic failure of Western Europe that could emerge if you reduce selection standards? I don't know anything about European migration standards, policies, effects. It's not a thing I've studied at all. Um, so I don't know what to say about that. I don't know what to say about that. I can only speak about ours and what our realities are, what we know about the data about this country, what we know about the habits of this country, what we know about the laws, what effect they've had. I can't speak for Europe. I think Europe has a different set of geographical demands, a different set of problems that they're going to have to encounter. They have a different economic model. I don't know anything about Europe, which is why I don't talk about it. I know, I mean, I'm no expert, but I try to remain knowledgeable about immigration situations as it pertains to this one. So I don't make immigration arguments that are as equally portable from Jamestown, Virginia to Jakarta. I can't do that. But focusing on our problems and our data and our situation, I can get a bit of a more of a coherent worldview.